This is Alabama Politics with Steve Flowers, an in-depth interview with Alabama's top political newsmakers. Now, from the studios of Troy University, here is Steve Flowers.
I'm Steve Flowers, and welcome to Alabama Politics. Folks, we're very fortunate tonight to have as our guest a celebrity, a well-known writer and news analyst and commentator named Todd Stacy, who is a well-known. He founded the Alabama Daily News, and the first thing I read every morning, a lot of you in the River region who watch this show are familiar with Todd's work, and you're also familiar with his work on Capitol Journal, Capitol Record, which comes on every Friday night and reruns on Sunday. And we're very fortunate to have him take time out of his busy schedule to be with us and talk about his Alabama Daily News and things going on in Alabama politics. Todd, good to have you.
Hey, good to be here, Steve. Thanks for the invitation.
I was talking to Todd before we started this show. I've been doing this show here at the Rosa Parks building in downtown Montgomery for close to 15 years now. Todd wasn't 21 years old when I first started doing it. Had you ever watched it? Had you ever watched it before?
Yeah, there was a channel we used to get that carried it, on the cable package. These days I don't get cable, so I'm not sure. I might have to get online.
That's the times have changed so much. I used to have to tell people when they're on the show that that what time their show came on the cable, but everything now is so digitally and YouTube oriented.
Absolutely.
That I'll have someone in Gunnersville or Huntsville say, "I saw Todd Stacy on your show," and I'm thinking, well, how did you see that? Because we did it in Montgomery and we only viewed in the River region. But it's just, as soon as it gets through, like when we get through today, we'll put your show up on the air, and you'll start having people say, well, I saw you on the television. Of course, they see you every week anyway. You get good guests and do a great job. And I want to tell you again how much I appreciate the Alabama Daily News. That's how I get my daily news. It's appropriately named, because every morning when I get on my phone or my computer, I look at that and I said, let me tell Todd, Todd's telling me what's going on in state politics. You've become the king of it, really.
Well, I really appreciate you saying that it's serving a news purpose in your consumption, right? Your news consumption. That's the whole point. I started Alabama Daily News about 5 years ago. I'd worked in politics for about 15 years prior to that. More like 20 years. And I've always wanted to be in the news business, but it struck me that as we move kind of more toward online, I'm an old newspaper guy, but as we move more toward online, it's these things. We're on our phones, and so basically making an email to where it's easy to consume. Okay, here's the top 5 stories of the day. Here are the bullet points that matter the most. If you want to click over and read the full story, you can. Here's the front pages from around the state. Here's other headlines from other outlets. Just making it very easy to consume, and therefore that's what got everybody reading, was because it's like, oh, this is just an easy, digestible news product. So I'm glad to hear that you found it that way.
Well, one thing I like on Monday is you cover the college football scene. Mm-hmm. You realize how important college football is to Alabamians.
Oh, yeah. Well, so one of the first things I did when I got enough money was to have an AP subscription, right? Subscribe to that. Associated Press, still the gold standard. But what came with it was some of that Auburn and Alabama coverage. So the AP poll, that I remember as a kid, I couldn't wait to get the Monday paper because I knew the AP poll was going to come out, And so it's the same kind of thing. It's a treat, to kind of review not just Auburn and Alabama, all the different scores from around the state, our schools and how we perform. This year they're actually all, except for Auburn, all doing pretty good. Well,
you mentioned that, and I actually I watch all the football channels on the weekend. I love college football almost as much as I love Alabama politics, and so I follow college football. But the smaller schools in the state don't get the kind of coverage, and I actually find out whether South Alabama or Troy or Alabama State won or Jacksonville on Monday morning sometimes.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, where's the Sunday score on the Troy or South Alabama? I tell you, you're talking about doing good. Troy and South Alabama are both doing excellent this year.
Jacksonville started out pretty good as well. And
Yeah.
So Auburn's gonna have to get it together. My alma mater.
I always thought you went to Alabama because to tell you what a good journalist you are, you give. I almost like read your thing. I think, well, Todd must have gone to Alabama. He seemed to be an Alabama fan. And then when you told me prior to the show you were an Auburn fan, that shows you good journalism.
Well, I am an Auburn grad, but part of the ethos of the Daily News is to truly be down the middle, and that means truly be down the middle in politics and on football. But sometimes people say they can read it bleeding out of me, the orange and blue. But look, Auburn didn't have a whole lot to write home about this year. So,
I try to do the same thing. I try to, when I first started writing my column about 19 years ago, I would get a lot of comments like, Flowers, you really are a Republican, aren't you? And then I'd have somebody say, well, Flowers, you sure are a Democrat, which I thought was flattering, because they couldn't tell whether I was really a Republican or Democrat. The only thing about it now, and I think Democratic voters know this, that and you pretty much write similar to what I do in that really the real race is in the Republican primary now. We just categorically a solid Republican state with 21 out of 21 elected offices, and has been that way for decades now. So I don't write much about the general election because there's really not much to write about.
It's interesting you say that. I was speaking with a group the other day that was really interested, not a terribly political group, but they've tuned in for hey, this guy's going to talk about the election. And that's kind of what I said. I was like, look, we can talk about November and the elections in Alabama, but there just aren't going to be a whole lot of surprises. We have sorted ourselves, voters have sorted ourselves into Republican and Democratic districts, Republican and Democratic states. You'd be hard pressed to find a Democrat win a statewide election here. It had to be something extraordinary, like the Doug Jones election was. But even in the legislature, I think you're going to see really there may be a couple of close races, but I think for the most part, no surprises, and the makeup of the legislature looks pretty much the same in January as it did right now.
I think it will. Numbers-wise, you got some new faces in the Republican primary. The Republican House seats. Not many changes in the Senate. That Senate's come back as intact as I've ever seen it. And to show you how uncontested the statewide races are, when I ask someone who's astute like you, what do you see with election, someone will go automatically to a state Senate race. Like you pointed out, the Vivian Figures race in Mobile could be close. I don't think it will be. And then you have others say, well, all those Madison County districts where Tom Butler is and the House district, Mac McCutcheon's old district, are they turning purple? Are they contested? I think they are. I think that they may be some interesting races. I don't think the Auburn race with Hovey's going to be a good race, but
I agree with you.
But the one here in Montgomery is basically a demographic change with Charlotte Meadows. But she could prevail based on turnout. She may. That's the only, as our viewers, most of our viewers in the River region, that's the only good race. I was talking to my Channel 8 the other day, and they said, well, what's the good races? I said, well, just not any. But you have one local legislative race, and when you don't have any races like that, Todd, nobody spends any money.
And one problem for Democrats is that take those legislative races where, like up in Huntsville, where they should, at least demographically, at least have a shot. Here in Montgomery, same way, down in Mobile with Senator Figures. What would really help them is if they had somebody at the top of the ticket that was driving out vote.
Right.
And it's no disrespect to Yolanda Flowers or to Will Boyd, but they're just not driving out that vote like, say, a Doug Jones would, or even a Walt Maddox would, or to say nothing of the presidential ticket like a Joe Biden or a Barack Obama. You need somebody driving out that vote. So I do think Democratic legislative candidates down ballot could struggle because of that, because where's the motivation to come vote?
I think you're right. And two, a good local race might drive the vote. For example, even though we're in a different era, sheriff races are very important. Like if you poll the probably the most popular public official here in Montgomery, it'd be the sheriff. He might be, he's very popular, and that's true. Now you've got a good sheriff's race possibly in Jefferson County, but I still don't think a Republican can win. But that'll be if the turnout is better in the Republican enclaves.
Yeah, that one's really, those demographics have really changed here in the last 10 or 15 years.
Yeah, it's a Democratic county.
Right.
It's as Democratic as Montgomery is,
For sure.
I mean, as far as this county. And Mobile soon will be. I think it's right on the verge too, simply because of the access to Baldwin County and everything. You know, one thing, Todd, and that I picked up on, and you may have noticed too, and I noticed at election night, getting back to your comment about the Democratic nominee for governor, Yolanda Flowers, I hadn't heard anybody say anything bad about her. She must be a real nice lady. But I was on the TV interview this morning on CBS 42 in Birmingham, and Andy Lindenberg was interviewing me, and she was talking about the governor's race. She said, I couldn't ask about the governor's race because I can't remember the person's name is running as a Democrat. It had my same last name.
Oh, wow.
She said, I know you got the same last name, but I couldn't remember her first name. But I've met her, and she's a nice lady, but she has zero money, and, she really is not working that hard. I mean,
It's tough. It's tough for any Democrat to go up against any Republican in the state. Something special has to happen, and then you've got to look at the mess that kind of exists at the Democratic Party right now. All the infighting, yet more infighting. They thought they had it fixed 2 or 3 years ago. Electing Chris England and really kind of turning the corner, but now it seems like they've kind of gone back to the old regime. So, but look, just demographically, we have sorted ourselves, and Alabama's a Republican state. Something's going to have to change for that to be any different.
Todd, you said something a while ago that sort of triggered a thought in my mind about my bygone years, too. I'm a lot older than you, obviously. But you probably grew up reading the Montgomery Advertiser.
Absolutely, every day.
Every day. It was thrown in my front yard in Troy growing up, and try to beat my daddy out there. But what I really loved was baseball when I was a little boy. And I would get that's just how old I am. My idols were Mickey Mantle and Roger Maris and Tony Kubek, the New York Yankees. I was young, and so I'd get the Montgomery Advertiser, and an old guy named Max Mosley was a sports writer. He'd wait for your time. They had the best sports page, and but you did it for politics too. You read the Montgomery Advertiser.
That's right.
The point I'm trying to get around to is, I bet you if you did a study on the Montgomery River region, Elmore, Autauga County people who are primarily the viewers of my show, the live part of it, not the. Anyway, they grew up. People my age grew up reading the Montgomery Advertiser. They read their local newspaper. But I wonder if right now in Montgomery, that as many Montgomeryans read the Montgomery Independent, but I'm not sure that your online publication wouldn't outdistance. Have you ever had a way to gauge that you'd have more readers in Montgomery reading your morning daily news? They ain't got to go out in the yard and get it. They ain't got to,
I really doubt it. I mean, we've grown in readership every year. This January will be our 5th anniversary, so I'm really proud of our growth. But no, I really don't think. I think the Advertiser still has healthy readership. It's different kind of paper. I mean, you mentioned football, but that's really just kind of all we dabble into. We cover government and politics. That's really it. We don't have your crossword puzzles and things like that.
No.
And so, yeah, look, I grew up reading the Advertiser, and that's really part of what got me into politics, into news. So I'm grateful for all those wonderful writers, reading those columns by Bob Ingram and all these. And I still encourage people to subscribe to their local paper. I hope they do. Ours is really geared toward folks who are really interested in politics, want to follow the day-to-day of what's going on in the legislature, what's going on in Congress. I'm really excited. We're going to have a lot more congressional coverage coming up with this next Congress coming in. So I'm excited about that. But no, I don't, look, it's no secret that the Advertiser has changed over the years. I blame part of that on Gannett and what a troubled company that is nationally. But look, they've got a lot of great reporters down here. Brian Lyman.
Right,
Yeah, absolutely. He's probably one of the best political reporter in the state. Wish he worked for us.
I learned from Phil Rawls.
Phil Rawls was a big mentor of mine.
He was one of the best.
And I
We're
tried to
contemporaries.
get him when he retired. I tried to get him to write a column for me.
He wouldn't do it?
Well, he thought about it and said, you know what, I'm going to put my feet up at the lake, and he deserves to. But that just shows what respect I have for him, and maybe I'll convince him one day.
Phil and I contemporaries, and we have always been good friends. I think he lives out at Pike Road. I don't think he lives, like you just using it as a euphemism, but.
Well, he was building the lake house down in Andalusia.
Oh, okay, he's from down there, that's right.
Yeah.
I loved old Phil, I like him a lot. But let me ask you this, so yeah, yours is more geared to politics and people who read it every day. I imagine a lot, but now a lot of my papers I'm in throughout the state, they're flourishing, or they're not flourishing, but they're not diminishing. The weekly papers are doing well for what reason you said. They still read their local paper to get the local news, see how their grandkid did in Little League Baseball, see who died. When you get people my age, I get the Tuscaloosa News because that's probably the biggest paper still left. It's that in the Montgomery Advertiser. I'm in the Tuscaloosa News, so I read it every Sunday for sure. And I swear, I used to kid about older people looking for the obituaries. And I'll look at people all over the state, because I know a lot of folks around the state, and say, golly, so-and-so died up there in Marion County. You know, somebody, but you know, that's they still read the local paper for that reason.
You're right, and you're right that, the small town papers have done really well over the years. I've followed that very closely, back working for a member of Congress, getting that column in every week. That's what you want. You want it on the coffee table.
Exactly.
Sitting there for a week, and they got that column. So, and I think those that have really stayed local and really focused on what they can cover locally. So it's tough for a paper like the Advertiser that really is the last truly statewide daily newspaper. You've got to stay local. You've got to be hyper local. But how much do you run that national story about what happened in Congress? What do your readers really want? That's tough. But the reason I read the Advertiser is for the great work of Brian Lyman in the State House, and to hear what's going on here locally with Montgomery city politics and what's happening in Prattville, my hometown. So I think that's a good, example of what people are looking for. But maybe they're looking for the New York Yankees. I don't know.
No. I love being in a small. I used to go out and visit every paper in the state when I was first started writing this column, because I'm in most of them. But Todd, one thing I was going to do is ask you about, even though we don't have any good races, let's do a cursory look at the statewide races. And time flies when you're my age, and project 4 years hence. Because even though all the people who won the Republican primaries in May this year will be elected 2 weeks from now in November, beginning with Governor Kay Ivey and Katie Britt. But we've got a lot of them who've got a future ahead of them, and they'll start jockeying, if they're not already, for the 2026 election. Now, Kay will not be. One story that's going on the radar screen, and when you look at it, you may have written about it, I'm going to write more about it, is this has been the year of the women. I mean, when you think about it, Todd, you got the governor, our U.S. senator, and let's put Twinkle Cavanaugh as being the three most popular, powerful figures in Alabama politics are females.
You also, down the ballot have a lot of women who have won legislative races. You look down at Baldwin County, where that was an all-male delegation. I guess it currently is about to be almost all female. So that's interesting. You've got some up in North Alabama that have prevailed. So more women than ever before are going to be in the legislature this time around. See, I do think that's significant. Also about Katie, yes, she's a woman. She's a young woman, a young mother.
Exactly.
She will be the youngest woman ever elected to the Senate. She'll only be the second youngest in the Senate to John Ossoff. But to have that perspective, the Senate is traditionally an older body because you've got to stay around so long to get that seniority. So for a 40-year-old mother of two to get elected and bring that different perspective, I think is really healthy. I think something Alabama should be proud of.
I think it's a real coup for Alabama. I think to send a 40-year-old female, accomplished female, who knows what she's doing, to Washington, they're already touting her as a superstar in Washington. Well, I mean, when you come there as a 40-year-old female with children, and and like you said, I'm getting old, but I went to the retirement party for Senator Shelby in Washington last week, and he introduced me to some of his colleagues, and they look a lot older than they do on television. Poor old Patrick Leahy, who's been a good friend of Shelby's for years, coach him, and Pat, whatever his name is, from Kansas.
Roberts.
Yeah, I said, man.
Leahy, I think, just had some health.
He looked like it. So it's time for him to retire. So there. And I told Katie, she was up there. I said, man, you look a lot different than Shelby's other colleagues.
It's something to be proud of, and like you said, because that Senate career, there's such a long runway there. You're likely to be there for a long time. That gives her such an opportunity to pick out some things about what she wants to do. You don't have to be thinking like a House member where it's just like, what can I do in 2 years? You can really think long term. I think that gives her a lot of advantages.
I thought Sean Ross did a real good job in her campaign.
Yeah. I
think he may go to Washington with her as his communications rep.
I tell you what, I hope that works out. He's a talented guy, and I'm. If I was going to make a recommendation, that's who I'd recommend.
I think she's going to take him with her.
And what she also brings is just that experience, having worked in the Senate so many years prior, not just here recently, but going back to the mid-2000s. So understanding how the place works, how to evaluate staff, how to evaluate talent, surround yourself with talented people. So yeah, it's just, I don't want to pump her up too much because I don't want to raise expectations, but just knowing Katie all these years, being a part of, in the same generation, if you will, as she will, I'm very excited to see what all she does.
Well, I'm excited as an older political veteran observer. It's a great coup for Alabama, and she'll be there from now. For the rest of your life, and definitely my life, she'll be in the Senate. When she won that Republican primary this year, she's there for life probably. It's tough to beat an incumbent senator. She's already raising money for 2028. She's got about $8 million, so they will never beat her. But going back to some other races on the ballot that will be elected to their second term, you got 3 or 4. Rick Pate is agriculture commissioner, and obviously Will Ainsworth is lieutenant governor, and Steve Marshall is attorney general. They're relatively young, especially Ainsworth. Now, Young may finish out his career. Young's older than I am. Young's in his mid-70s, I think. But he'll finish out this term. He's in great health. And Mace, I think he can run again. I don't know. I can't remember. But Young may not want to run for anything different. But those 3, and then you got Wes Allen and Andrew Sorrell on the scene. So you got 5 newcomers. 3 of them have got to go somewhere else 4 years from now.
That's right.
And Wes Allen and Andrew Sorrell can stay. How do you see them? They may be jockeying for who gets the most votes in this general election,
which will be interesting to watch. There's always weird factors that affect that, right? Like who they're running against and all this kind of stuff. You bring up Will Ainsworth and Steve Marshall. Obviously, those would be the top candidates that you would see to be contenders for governor next time. Ainsworth especially because maybe not officially, but behind the scenes has made it very clear that he's seeking the governor's office and might as well, put him on the ballot. And look, he's formidable. He won that race against Twinkle. That was a hard-fought race that most people didn't expect him to win.
No.
He's, I think, learned some political lessons over these last 4 years that will be to his credit. So I do think he's a formidable candidate and kind of lives and breathes the politics. But look at Steve Marshall. had him on the show here recently. There's probably nobody, maybe other than Kayavi, but maybe including Kayavi, who's getting more media, more press, more attention for the things they're doing right now than Steve Marshall, looking at all this Supreme Court race stuff, looking at some of these convictions that he's getting upheld. So he really might surprise some people in terms of his competitiveness if he chooses to enter a gubernatorial primary.
You know, I agree with you. Interesting, I find them both of them in the same county.
Right, yeah, both are Marshall County.
That's amazing. We've only got about a minute and a half left. I was asking you one quick question. Your take on the Supreme Court thing and our congressional thing. What odds would you give on that?
It's tough to say because you talk to one person and they say, look, of course they're going to take Alabama's side with a conservative court. But then you talk to another person that say, I don't know. I mean, this all they got to do is uphold what this panel did.
2-1 Republicans in that 3-judge panel, too.
Trump appointees. So it's tough for me, and I'm not a lawyer. I'll just say this. We need clarity from the court. The court needs to give states, not just Alabama, but all states clarity because the committee tried to follow the law. They really did. They tried to follow the process of the law. Now they're saying, this panel is saying that the law should be different. The law should be interpreted different. Well, that's exactly why we need a Supreme Court. So I hope there's plenty of clarity, and I hope the legislature next time around knows exactly what the rules are, and that we don't have to adjudicate this and make it into a race fight every time.
I think they'll give us a decision by March or April.
Sure.
At the end of the term, or the Supreme Court term. But this affects more than just Alabama.
Absolutely.
There are other states doing the same way of reapportioning.
Yep.
We have a good time. We own this thing. It goes by in a hurry, doesn't it?
It does, but I really appreciate it. I've enjoyed it.
Our time is up, folks. Our guest tonight has been a popular young commentator and editor of the Alabama Daily News, Todd Stacy, who grew up here in the River region, born and raised in Prattville. And y'all read his work every morning if you get a chance. He tells you what's going on in the world, called Alabama Daily News. And we thank you, viewers, for watching. Hope you tune in again next week for Alabama Politics. Thank you.